watch new Survivor. We're stuck in a bad dream. So we're watching an old season with a silly pirate theme. Of course there's a new theme song, but it's as half-assed as our plans. And then something, mumbo something, a word that rhymes with plans. John will make some dumb jokes. Andy likes to yell and curse. Something about some backup host. How could hell be any worse? We'll spend the whole time wishing that our lives were back on track. But until then, it's Pirate Survivor. We can all be glad for that. It's the Purple Rock Whatever Podcast, our mateys.
Hello, and welcome to the absolute most important thing going on in the world right now, the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast, discussing a season of Survivor from like 13 years ago. What could be more important than this? I ask you. Anything?
Nothing. This is where my entire attention is, Andy. I am not paying. I am 100% with you guys. That's it.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, technically, I did watch both these episodes on Tuesday, as like that'll knock out a chunk of time. That'll keep us busy.
Yeah. When you're done this, you should have no. So yeah, we're recording on Thursday night. For those of you listening to this Friday or whenever you're listening to, so we do not officially know the results of the thing that people are actually thinking about, but we do know the results of these episodes, as we have known for well over a decade, or at least, you know, true of Emma and I. Matt maybe a little less. We're doing it anyway. With let's be fair, relatively low anxiety about what's going on out there. So let's get into it. This is actually a big week. Honestly, if it wasn't a big week, I think I would have just said, screw it. Let's not do it this week. But we're talking about two episodes, What the Part 1 and 2, which not on here, but how wild must it have been? And I don't remember, even though it was this way for us, to wait a whole week in between this. That is just a sign of the past. Now, it did end with tribal council, so at least you did have the traditional thing. But so this week we have the Outcasts. The Outcast tribe is here, and I think the most interesting discussion is what our reaction to it, watching it now, versus what our reaction was the first time we watched it. And right up front, I'm going to say that this discussion will have a little bit of spoilers for future season mechanics. Because that, I think, will change the discussion a bit. We're not going to talk about the rest of the season, as we've promised not to do, and we won't even talk about how those future seasons ended as a result. But just if you want to be completely spoiler free, we've probably already given you an impression that you shouldn't be listening, because we've talked about future seasons before. Emma, you watched this like I did way back when it first aired. However, you were a wee child. Is your perspective on the Outcast twist different now than it was then?
I'm going to be honest, I don't remember what my reaction was. I think you knew that was coming, and that's why you highlighted being a wee child. I think technically I was a wee teenager, but it's definitely small, as we previously discussed. But I don't fucking remember. I know I liked Rupert. I know how I felt about who won, but I won't talk about that now, obviously. Like, it genuinely, no memory of how I felt then.
I would have thought this is one of those moments that would stick out a bit.
You would think. You would think. But it did
Correct.
not. Perhaps the trauma of middle school was too much.
Maybe we should have discussed this before throwing the very first question of someone who was just like, don't know.
I got no opinions.
I got nothing.
Great. This is why I never ask people questions. I just wait to answer questions. I pretend to show interest, and this is what I get.
I can share, however, what someone.
I don't care what you think now. The whole
Roger. Yeah. Let's hear what Roger got. Yeah. Should cut that.
You mean the nameless spell? Anyway, he was like, first he was just like, what the fuck? Which is fitting given the title.
That's the title.
And then was like, wait, so are they just, because I didn't want to like say anything, so he's just like, wait, are they just like all back now? And I was like, just watch and see. And then there was a lot of like, oh, they like that doesn't seem fair. They ate and like this seems rigged when they won and like all of that. So there were this batch of episodes first, and we'll get into it more later, was the hardest time I've had keeping a straight face when he discusses thoughts, and was the most times I had to pause and be like, okay, here's the tea. Like here's some backstory, here's some context, and I talked about the other mechanics, and how this was very unpopular at the time, but like, and then they don't do something even similar to this until season 22, like, and added sort of some stuff like that. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, so his reaction sounds like what mine was way back in whatever year this was, 2003. We've been talking about this forever, and I can never remember
It's
what year.
2003.
But I nailed it. Yeah, it was like, what the hell is going on? Which is the reaction they're going for. Literally the episode title. They probably were going with hell, I think, not what he went with.
I don't know. Burnett's kind of a Bible thumper. I'm not sure he would be.
Well, it is called
What
what
the
the.
heck?
I'm just saying what the person said on air. It wasn't. It didn't get the Johnny Fairplay cursing sting which we get like 100 times per episode lately.
I do love the curse because it's so mild. It's just like, dong.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kids very much notice it. Is he swearing all the time? Yes. And then yeah, same thing. It's like, what? So now we just have everybody again? Is the season never going to end? And yeah, it was an outrage. This was a slap in the face of what Survivor was supposed to be. And people were outraged by it. That was the general reaction. I don't know if I was fully outraged, but I didn't like it. And probably the greater level of outrage came as what happened by the end of this episode, or by the end of the second episode.
As it should be. I mean, come on now. That's the real
We know
outrage.
what Matt was the most upset
Now, Matt,
by.
you watched this a little later.
Yeah.
Did you watch this before or after you've already seen seasons where they have brought people back mid-game?
After. So I had seen this after the Redemption Island mechanic. And then because I think I went back to watch these seasons I had missed, because I took a big gap of time off, and then I came back to watch the seasons I had missed probably after like Philippines or so, because that was like really the season that kind of rehooked me to make me go back and like fill in the gaps. So I watched this now that's probably like 7 years ago, right? Time passes way too quick. And my reaction was a little different from the ones you were describing. My reaction even then was, okay, they're bringing people back. This is, kind of weird. And then it was, I actually think this is interesting. This is kind of cool. And I think kind of like by the end of the season, I had soured, or maybe even by the end of the episode, I had soured a little bit on it. But my general reaction to it then, and the same one that I've probably said to you many times, was that this was actually this was very close to a good idea. And then they didn't refine the way they did it here, and instead made it much, much, much worse every subsequent time they did it.
And I think the issue is that it was just thoroughly rejected by the audience, as unfair. And like Jeff Probst himself did not like this twist.
No.
He was against it. And, as the seasons go on, he gets more power. So, it's less likely to happen.
Which is interesting.
And they do
I feel like
refine
he likes Redemption Island and Edge of Extinction.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe because the changes probably fit a bit more for him, because we're going to talk about. Well, let's talk about it now. One of the ways this is dramatically unfair is everything he says about what happens with the Outcast tribe and how they were just fed a little bit of rations and all that is complete bullshit. It is not true,
and he has admitted as much.
Yeah. Matt unearthed an interview he did with
earlier this year. I think.
With Google, and who's that dude's name? Dean.
I have no idea. I didn't even
Can't remember
honestly.
Yeah,
Dean from Island of the Idols, and I can't remember his stupid name. D Chillin, actually, is it?
Oh yeah, DK Chillin.
DK
Chillin.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. We got a different kind of animal interrupting us this week. But he's not on camera. That was a lie. That basically Mark Burnett on the spot came up with the idea, because they do hold people once they're voted out.
They had already sent them to the hotel, he said.
Yeah, and they're like, hey, send them back out there. And yeah, and like frankly, even if what he said was true, it's still unfair. He's like, oh, they've been given a
Right.
bare minimum in protein. Morgan hasn't been getting protein.
No.
And they wouldn't, and when my husband and I discussed this too, because I hadn't, at the time we had watched it, we hadn't seen that interview that Matt was talking about, but was saying that even if it's true, and like I'm sure, they still had somewhere dry to sleep, they're not expending energy to get this food and these rations. It's being given to them.
Right.
And so even when you're comparing to Drake, like at least Rupert's having to like fight to fish and all of that, whereas they would just be given it. So yeah, I think it's definitely, and do we want to talk about how we feel about it now, or are we still just kind of generally
Well,
talking?
I mean,
So,
let me just also say, like, it's
Yeah.
also, besides all like the fact they weren't like physically, suffering the way that Jeff described, there's also the mental aspect. If you're not having to vote people out or worried about being voted out or having to strategize, it's a lot calmer. And you're just, worrying about that mentally burns calories and is very stressful. And if you don't have to deal with that, that makes your life a lot better.
Yeah,
and
the
we
So
reason
know
why
this.
no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say when we really know this because Rick Devens has said like an Edge of Extinction is most certainly harder than whatever they had to do. Like
yeah,
really, and Rick Devens has said like the Edge is not as hard. Like you don't have to strategize. You don't have to do this. Like yeah, is it miserable? Sure, but it's not as difficult.
Yeah. And the reason why I jumped ahead to the bullshit that made it feel unfair is that that could be what Probst was doing for the correction when creating Redemption Island and Edge of Extinction, and that now that's not there. We see the people out there still on the island, still in the same clothes, having to come up with their own shelter, having to come up with their own food. So we see that they are suffering. Um, and we see that they're still playing some level of a game, and I'd say of the different levels. Redemption Island, it's not like Edge. You're just sitting and waiting, so there isn't that stress. And in fact, it's not because they're not voted back in. It's really just one day we'll compete and one of us gets to move on and we'll feel good about it.
right.
Suppose if they at least were voting in, there would be maybe some level of gamesmanship of like, I need to secure votes later on, which again did not actually happen with the Outcasts because they didn't know that's what was going to be happening. But Redemption Island, you do at least have the stress of like every few days you have to worry about whether you're going to stay or not the same level of stress, but it's something. So I can see from Probst's frame of mind that that's the correction. The thing that was wrong with the Outcast is that it was unfair to the people playing. And the problem is, no, you're wrong. That's not what was wrong.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is, and the thing that I maintained when I first watched this, and that I think I'm even more certain about now, is I think the Outcast gets two things entirely right. The first is I really like the idea that the Outcasts have to win their way back in. They're not guaranteed a way back in. They have to win a challenge, and they have to win it as a tribe, which I think is very fitting for that portion of the game. They have to demonstrate they can work together in a tribe portion of the game, and then based upon how they do, they get to send either one or two people back in. So the other tribes can prevent this, which I think is actually a really good idea and one that I kind of wish had been repeated. And then the other idea, the other mechanic that they definitely get right and that we have cried for every time they do something similar is they end it at the merge. And I'm going to stop now so that Andy can take the floor.
Yes. This is your weekly guinea pig update. We're still waiting on the update that we're all waiting for, although maybe not when people are actually watching and listening. Hopefully not when people are actually watching and listening. But still healthy and hearty. He's going. It looks like he's having a little snack. How you doing, bud? Good. Did you like this week's Survivor episodes with the Outcasts coming back and all of that?
It was odd.
It was odd. Did you feel it was unfair? Was your reaction what the oh yes. The beagle is very interested in the guinea pigs.
Oh dear.
Actually, a quick funny story. One day they left, the boys left the door open to where the room where the guinea pigs are, and Gromit must have somehow opened the cage and climbed into the cage. And I go in, I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna see some dead rodents. No, Gromit was just sniffing around, his whole body in this cage. While the guinea pig that was left, not Onion, the other one was just kind of sitting there in the corner, like, don't let the big thing eat me, don't let the big thing eat me. So that was a fun day. I was working in my home office, which is behind me. All right, bud.
Oh,
How
good job,
about you
Gromit, not eating
take
the guinea
Onion
pig.
out of here before Gromit climbs up on you again? You want to say good night to everybody?
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Onion.
I just wanted them all for like 2 hours.
Yeah, they know. That's why they had to wait for us to start
Wow.
this thing.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah. All right.
Oh,
So yes,
Matt, imagine being in a mall.
it's
Can't
a
do
little
it.
different here.
Can't
Couldn't
do
be
it.
me.
One can dream. One can dream.
I mean, is being in a mall really that nice?
I was gonna say, to
No,
be
it's really
fair,
not.
when is
It's
the
not.
like? Had I been in a mall in 2019?
Nah.
Yeah, for 2
but-
hours, I'd be complaining about it, not celebrating.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So yeah, Matt makes the good point that it ends at the merge, and this is what we've been saying about the Edge of Extinction. We've never actually recorded a podcast while Redemption Island is going on, but similar idea. And I think that's a
No,
big
blood
thing. And I
versus
think that's
water.
what's that?
Blood versus
Sorry,
water.
this is not the point, but our very first podcast had Redemption Island.
I mean, when I said we, I mean the three of us. We didn't let you guys.
Oh
on.
yes, of
Okay.
course. You were being technically accurate, the best kind of accurate.
That's right. But yeah, that's a big improvement, and I think that's part of why watching this now, I have no complaints about the Outcast twist. It was an effrontery to the game, and it's actually interesting that Emma tells us that Mr. Emma, who has never watched Survivor, still found it that way, or at least confusing. And I get it. Like, he thinks he's watching a contest with a certain set of rules, and all of a sudden, no, those aren't the rules. That's
But
actually
he's heard
probably a
me
way.
talk about it enough to like know what the concept is.
Yeah, I mean, also Andrew Savage says it's an affront to the game, so therefore everyone
it's
believes
true.
it to be so. He is the most trustworthy narrator.
But now
I-
it's like, yeah, it's like not only is it like an improvement on like the later twists of it because of like ending at the merge and maybe a few other reasons we can get to, but I think it leads to like we'll talk about this more later this season. But I don't think it actually hurts this season. In many
No.
years, we've like in the past, I think we've often said that like Pearl Islands overcomes a bad twist due to just great casting, and that's a truism in Survivor. The real key to a good season is just the people. But I honestly think the Outcast twist adds to this season. I don't think it's just something to overcome. I actually think maybe it's nostalgia, maybe because we know how much worse it could be. I do think this is actually going to inject a little juice into the second half, and we'll talk about that. As that happens.
Yeah.
Other takes, because people were trying to interrupt me, and I didn't.
Yeah,
let them.
my main take is kind of what's been addressed, but just I think put a little more simply. I think Outcast is probably the most unfair of the returning player twist, but I think it's also the most entertaining version of it.
Well, Edge of Extinction was also. Well, yeah, I guess it's not. It was unfair in that it was sprung on them the first time, and that's
Right.
another way where Outcast is unfair. Nobody knew that when they were voting these people out, they could come back.
Right.
Yeah,
That is-
and Outcast has both versions of unfair. They
Yes.
have it's too comfortable and no one knew it was coming. So they maybe didn't handle how they would vote someone out the same way as they would
Right.
have if they knew they were coming back.
Yes.
Or maybe they did handle them, and that
And
person,
that other person just didn't remember.
So one thing that I've always been kind of divided on with the Outcast twist, and I'm curious about what you guys think, is the mechanic of voting back in, which obviously if you're competing as a tribe is necessary. But just, do you think that is a mechanic that works?
I think it doesn't work any worse than winning your way back in, because, and that it's probably largely because we don't really care about challenges that much, but also because winning your way back in suddenly makes the whole thing basically open up for a certain type of player.
Yeah.
you know, like later on in seasons, there's people who hang around and it's like, why are you hanging around? You will never get back in. And then some people don't as a result, right? They don't hang around. Whereas this, theoretically, everyone has a chance.
And we saw the people get voted back in, and while one was a typical challenge beast in Burton, the other is Lil, who I don't think people would describe that way.
Yeah.
Also,
And what's interesting is
it
everybody
only
got
takes 3 votes.
Yeah,
Right.
it took 1 vote. Yeah, everybody got 1 vote, and I think most everybody got at least 2.
So 4 people got 2, and then so 4.
Oh, so
of the
nobody
6
just got
2.
1 then.
No, sorry.
No, 2 people got 1. 2
I was
people
saying
got
2
1.
because I misunderstood. I thought you were saying the votes they made, not the votes they received. So
Right. Yeah. No, I'm saying like now that is also, I think, part of the haphazardness of it, because these people did not know that they would be competing to get back in the game, and then it would be a situation where they would be voted back until they arrived out there and Jeff informed everyone. I think that probably led to, frankly, it probably led to the game being a little closer to how Survivor was originally envisioned, and that people just based their votes on whatever thinking they wanted at the time. Whereas, if they were to do that again, and everybody knows this what's happening, then it could be like a social engineering aspect to the time when they are voted out from the time they are. And that could be more interesting than just waiting to see like which, challenge beast will, do best at that particular moment. Challenge beast being people like, well, actually, no, I don't want to give away who won different ones. It's not always challenge beasts who have won their way back in, but
That's
it
true.
is still like a subset of people. And there's a certain subset of people that are never going to win their way back in. Whereas I don't know if there's anybody who could, we could just reasonably say is never going to get voted in unless they're just awful people.
In which case we don't want to see them get voted
in. Which is great. You made your own bed, that judgment is being rendered upon you due to your own actions. So maybe it would actually be better.
Yeah, the more we talk about it, the more I like it. I was just kind of curious about what you guys thought of that.
Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's fun. I think it's, at like everything you guys were saying. The one thing is, I think because it is such a small group and because they get to like it's a little weird with how like spread out it ends up being, because it feels almost like, man, some of the other people like came so close to it, but what are you gonna do? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, maybe you don't let 2 people back in which case then I don't think it would be as diffuse a vote.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think so either. But it was interesting. So like I found the vote breakdown of like who they had each voted for. And, most people voted for the people that started on the same tribe as them. And then in a couple places it looked like there was like kind of like maybe like an informal like agreement. I'll vote for you if you vote for me. Like Trish voted for Lil voted for Trish.
And I think some of that too is like maybe they had talked about it, but also you have, the 2 older women in the group.
Yeah, maybe they were roommates in their hotel room that wasn't outside suffering like everyone else. We're leading there into that. There might be a little more to discuss the Outcasts, but this is part of it. So, as we've already kind of discussed, surprising that Lil was one of the people voted back in. Burton made sense based on how it worked out. They had to win a challenge, and then they had to vote in. And he is the reason they won the challenge. He beasted through it. He cut his chest open, the whole deal. And since they're all motivated by like let's one of them win, and the parameters of the way Survivor was thought of back then, he seems to be the most likely candidate. Lil, opposite end of the spectrum, not necessarily what you would consider the most likely person to make it to the end of the Survivor.
Mr. Emma was floored. Like when she was talking, he was even like when they're kind of all giving their spiels, and he was like, okay, I mean, like, you're not gonna get back in though. And I was just like,
yeah, my kids were rooting for Skinny Ryan. So why Lil is the question. And the long-standing rumor in the Survivor community has been that the people, her fellow outcasts, voted for Lil to get back in the game so that they would have to no longer spend time with her in the trip that they send people on, the pre-jury trip. Do we think that is true, or do we think that is apocryphal? Keeping in mind that one of the mascots of our site is Sad Lil.
It's a fun rumor. I never really bought into it personally.
I will say I originally kind of bought it because I thought, and I don't know if this was just because of the story, but I kind of always assumed or thought that it was Nicole and Michelle that vote for her. And so it's like that kind of, and obviously Skinny Ryan. And I was like,
Right.
that kind of tracks. I could see that. But now having, seen how the votes break down, and like, yes, Nicole did vote for her, but Nicole voted for Lil and Skinny Ryan. So she just voted for the people she played with. Like, that seems pretty straightforward. Obviously, Skinny Ryan is close to Lil. That makes sense. And then as I just discussed, the other one was Trish. And first of all, like, Trish does not seem as much as someone who is like, oh man, I don't want Lil, like I want to hang out with all these young people on the pre-jury trip. That's going to be a great time. She probably ends up spending a lot of time with Savage at that. But yeah, so one thing that I was like, okay, then I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah, so I've always believed it because I wanted to. It's a great take. But
it sounds so true.
Yeah, it's like it makes as much sense as anything, right? You hear that, it's like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. And also,
Right.
but once Matt made us look at the votes today, yeah, I mean, Trish had only been with her for like a day. Like it was Trish,
right, like how annoyed
they're all
she?
like getting together. And it's like, we got to do this so that we don't need to spend time with Lil. And the one person, to execute it is the person that not only doesn't know Lil at all, but doesn't really know like half the group. She's the last person there. So I think we can put that rumor to bed, or we can just keep living it. Like it's fine. Like there's plenty of other apocryphal Survivor moments, and we could just pretend to go with it. But no, I think it's just it doesn't take much to get to 3 votes. I think that's the other thing.
That's
like
the thing.
while I was believing this, is I didn't quite realize, I couldn't quite remember how like diffuse the vote was, right? It kind of felt like it's a choice, and really like a bunch of people were getting 2, and then 2 people got 3, and she got that extra vote.
Yeah, I had actually remembered, like, for some reason, I had vaguely remembered that one person got 4. And then when they didn't, I was like, I remember that.
Yeah, honestly,
wrong.
it's a little surprising Burton only got 3, considering that he's how they got there. But
now we were just looking at Lil's votes, but what were Burton's?
Trish voted for Burton, Michelle voted for Burton, and Burton voted
Ryan
for Michelle, and Skinny Ryan voted for Burton.
Yeah.
So Trish
Which is
and
kind
Ryan,
of funny from Skinny Ryan, but I guess he probably just didn't know Nicole very well. I was just like, yeah, he'll probably win. And,
or maybe he didn't like
angry.
Nicole. Maybe he didn't like Nicole and was just like, I don't know who else to vote for. Burton seems like he's going to really try to stick it to them. So
and he obviously is very motivated, judging by his his bandana.
He figured Burton was his best chance to bring murder to those jerks. Quickly, before we finish with the Outcast thing, like another thing that people talk about when they complain and they're bargaining and complaining about like twists like Edge of Extinction or Redemption Island, which again, I should be clear, you're right to complain all that. Like this isn't a case of me, saying everybody stop complaining. Those aren't good. It's a bad thing that the show should stop doing. But they say maybe it would be okay if we didn't spend any time with them, that they just come in. And that's what happens here, right?
Yeah.
In part because they weren't going to film them going about their day at the hotel and stuff. This wasn't a plan. It was just like, hey, we got everybody. Why not? Let's do this as a way to save Rupert. Do you think that? So this is a season where we didn't waste a lot of time or any time with the Outcasts until it was time to go. Do you think that would be a way if they have to continue to do seasons where people are voted out but not? Or what do you think?
I'm fine with it. Like, yeah. I mean, like, look, there were times when spending times with the tribes we had dragged a little bit, but like, the Pelican probably would have gotten cut had we had to spend 10 minutes with the Outcasts.
No, we would have followed him to the Outcast beach.
I think in a perfect world, there aren't any twists that bring someone back. But in a slightly less perfect world, I think you have bonus footage on like CBS All Access or something.
Yeah.
And
so
that's ultimately where you watch it.
It's a discussion because one of the biggest flaws of this is that we're not getting enough time with the people playing the main game. And as future seasons will show, we're still not getting the proper amount of time with the people that are on these islands to, effectively tell their story should they come back in. It's too awkward to do, and it's not comparable time. But like, especially the most recent season where they do this, Winners at War, they're not voting these people out of the game because they don't want to lose them. So, it has a television choice of, we'll just keep them off TV. It's like, no. They're doing this so that if they lose, and I think this is the exact reason why Redemption Island came into existence,
Right.
is if we lose certain people who we plan on marketing the season around, we don't lose them right away. And so the whole point is to keep them on TV. So it's something worth discussing. But if they're comfortable with them being voted off and then not being on TV, then they should just be comfortable with them being voted off. Like, I think this whole thing exists to keep these people still on TV. So really, the full fix is what we've always said. Obviously, the easiest fix, never do it again. But 2 is end it at the merge. And over the most recent seasons where they keep doing this, I've even said, not just as a negotiating tactic, but I think maybe it would actually be a possible positive if they did this thing, but ended it at the merge.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the way I feel too.
Yeah.
But no, finish your point. Sorry.
Because, as I already said, I think this season still is good after this. And I think that the Outcasts are part of the result of that. And that actually can bring us into like this episode, in that like the vote outs that happened before the Outcasts got there, neither of which were particularly interesting. Well, okay, one of which, because the other one wasn't quite a vote out. But they were like things that we saw coming, right? Yeah. Whereas, and then the merge, I think, the merge vote that would come very much looked like it was going to follow a very traditional of early season Survivor when you have a tie. It was just going to be us versus them and then see what breaks. But because we had this new injection and these new elements into it, we get a very different way of breaking that tie and a very different way of breaking it down. So I do think like this season it adds to it. And then in future seasons, as I've said before, we all know who the early votes in Survivor tend to be lately. So maybe it would be nice if at least one of them got one more chance.
And the other thing is, we've seen early votes, pre-merge votes, come back and play the game again and be interesting players. It's not that they're not interesting players just because they got voted out. I think having a mechanic where you might give one or two of them a second shot in that season is not inherently a bad mechanic. It's just that it has to end at the merge because they have to still demonstrate they can play a full post-merge game.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing why this one probably felt so wrong, is nobody had ever come back before Burton and Lil did.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas now people come back all the time. Sorry, what you were saying, Emma?
Oh, no, it's fine. It served the purpose I needed it to.
I mean, I'll find out what you said when I edit this later. I'm not going to edit this later. All right. So 2 of them come back in, and there are 2 very different approaches of how this thing goes. Let's start with what happens with Drake and Burton, and how when Drake is all like, oh, okay, well, for one, hopefully it's not Burton. When it is, they're all like, hey, welcome back, in the middle of like a brutal storm. And then Burton himself is like, oh, guys, I'm so sorry, I'm ready to be part of this tribe. What did you think of both of those approaches?
I think it was the smart move for both of them, even if they're both bullshitting, I think you gotta do it. I think with Burton too, it's just like such an interesting thing because he knows he was throwing that challenge too. So it's like, yeah, sure, they betrayed him, but it's also like a little bit making your own bed, in a way that's different than maybe some of the other people who were voted out. And yeah, so like both sides, have like, if you're Krista, you can be mad at Burton even though you voted him out, just because of what he was trying to do. But yeah, they've like, as much as Rupert thinks otherwise, like they kind of know that there's a merge coming. Like they just went to 10, they're at 10. They had already got to 10. Like at minimum, it's soon. Like there would be, in a couple votes, and he's immune, in that next vote. So you don't want to piss him off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to completely suck up to him, because I bet they're all thinking, because they did this and they didn't give them a merge and they're putting people in tribes, that there's probably going to be at least one more to sort
Right.
this out. Which
It is
actually I like that.
weird. It's
like
weird that they made them immune and like did the whole thing, and then it's the merge, because you'd think the whole point is so they don't get voted out, but like you're not gonna lose at least one of them.
Right. Yeah, but I think again, it's you want kind of some wild cards in play. And they didn't know that the tribe would win and bring 2 people back. They thought, hey, maybe it's only 1 instead of 2.
I actually like
Sure
that
they
they sent them
didn't.
to
The tribes. Yeah.
even though like the very next day they were no longer tribes, because it gave them a little bit of time to try and integrate into, and then how it worked out, reintegrate into their groups.
Yeah.
It might have potentially actually even been more interesting if both of them ended
Went
up
to
on
the
opposite
others.
ones, because then they're both like 100% ready to betray the people who voted them out.
Right.
Like I like that they had to do that and then threw them in, as opposed to if it would just been right out of submerge, it would have been 4 of one tribe, 4 of another, and 2 outsiders. Just like gave them both a chance to maybe work something with a smaller group, and then of course we see one of them did and the other one didn't.
The problem, I think, is just that I think if you're going to do that, at least give them, maybe not a whole cycle, but like a day where they're not doing anything. Like they spent one rainy night together and then they went and they merged. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think you're probably right about that. But one of the reasons I think that one tribe's approach worked and the other didn't was, kind of summed up by Rupert's approach to Burton, which was apocryphal in in the specifics, but the general vibe of it was, I think, accurate, which is Rupert was like, this is why I voted you out. Rupert did not, as Andy pointed out in our chat, Rupert did not vote Burton out. Rupert was not there when Burton was voted out. But the sentiment was accurate. And I think that the tribe in general was like radically candid about what happened to get Burton voted out. And I think that allowed them to put it behind them. And when Lil came to the other tribe, they just blew smoke up her ass because they were pissed that she was there. And none of those people have the ability to be candid with Lil. And frankly, I don't think Lil has the ability to kind of take, candor from them. So it was, I think that's why Burton was able to reintegrate and Lil wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think some of it too is that they were the Drake tribe, because of, especially with Rupert and his explanation, was able to make Burton not be like the betrayed victim of them. They were able to turn it around to at least make it kind of even, where it's not just him being like, you guys voted me out and I am mad at that. Whereas like Lil, like they couldn't, I don't think Morgan even really could have done anything, like, because what are you gonna tell Lil about, like, you know what, you bullied me? Like there's just nothing you can do with that. So I think that was just like a little advantage on their part, because they're also two, very different people. But
it's probably very different if it's Michelle coming back instead of Burton, or Trish coming back.
Yeah.
I mean, Michelle would be like, why did you chug that milkshake, you fucking idiot?
We shouldn't have gone to tribal.
You made your own bed,
Michelle
dumbass.
and Burton can both be kind of like, you made your own bed.
Yeah.
I mean, Trish could be too. Trish could be, Trish, like, Trish, Rupert, you were in good with us. Why'd you take the shot at Rupert?
Yeah. Drake was pretty much set up. The only Morgan's best bet, I think, was Nicole coming back.
Yeah,
because similar deal,
similar deal, and she's just like less likely, like, even though she was first, like it's sort of that little like, oh, we had to vote someone, and like, do you want to, you were after me, and like Ryan and Lil was just like, you guys were weak and didn't fit in.
Yep. Yeah. I don't want to move too fast because the Rupert thing, because I think the discussion was good and that they were clearing the air. I think it was good for Rupert to talk about how he didn't appreciate the way he was being treated by Burton, and now he feels more secure in doing that because this is Rupert's tribe, it's not Burton's.
Right.
But the reason why I pointed out that, Rupert, you did not vote for him is that I thought it was very stupid for Rupert to be like, I'm going to tell you why I personally voted you out when he has every out in the world. You get to be the guy, Rupert. Like, I was shocked when you left. I was shocked when I came back, came to the challenge and found out they voted you out. Like, he could have been the inside man. He could have easily bonded with the immune person and said, like, man, that wasn't me. I wasn't there. Like, it could have been like even sent there by like Sandra and Krista to do that. Like, you go get on his good side, sell out John, who we want to vote out anyway. Hell, say it was 100% John's idea to flip and vote you out. Like, Rupert has every way. He did not vote for him. He was not there. And I don't think Rupert even remembers. And like, sure, Rupert would have voted out. I think that was his plan before he switched over, but you didn't. You get to not say that. You don't have to tell Burton that, yeah, it was me, because it wasn't.
Unless Trish told Burton the whole story.
I was gonna say they're one.
Trish is a goddamn liar who we had to vote out because she was a liar.
Yeah,
I mean,
but also
like,
this would
I gotta
require
come clean because Trish is telling him the truth. There's no fucking way. Rupert did that because he wanted to reframe this, that everything that's going on at Drake right now is Rupert world. And this was his way of getting revenge on you. And also, he wanted to put Burton in his place, the same way he likes to put Sean in his place when he tries to go fishing, and the same way he put John in his place when he dared vote against him. This is just
who voted for me.
There is also, however, Rupert, Burton approached Rupert about throwing a challenge, and then suddenly both sides were throwing the challenge, and the side that Rupert is closest to all voted for Burton.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Also,
Burton's not an idiot.
I mean, also, Rupert is not the master of subterfuge.
He was lying to him that day. He was able to do it back then. All he has to do is not say that he voted him out. That's all. Like, he did not vote him out. He's lying now when he says that the reason why I voted you out, Burton. You didn't, Rupert. You weren't there. It wasn't what happened. So you don't have to tell Burton why you voted him out. If you want, you could tell him why the tribe did. But you can lie and say, I wasn't interested in that. You could tell him that I thought we were still doing what we said we were doing the very last time you and I spoke. And, you say Burton isn't an idiot. Why would Burton believe otherwise? He believed him then. And again, Rupert was not there. It is very easy to sell if you are in any decision to make to sell that I wasn't in on the plan. It only happened because I wasn't there. Maybe you could say if I was there, you wouldn't have gotten voted out, but they made their move. And since then, there's been like a week, and I've gotten much closer with them. At the time, Burton believes that Rupert wasn't with Krista, clearly. So, and so you say, well, yeah, Rupert isn't smart enough to do that. Yeah, that's why I'm criticizing his gameplay. This is what a good game player would have done. It was a bad thing what Rupert did, and symbolic of the ways that he is deficient at Survivor.
I think it was bad in the sense that you're describing, but I also think that's the conversation that actually got Burton comfortable with them for this vote. And that's the most important thing they had to do. They had to get Burton comfortable with them to get past this vote.
Another way of making him comfortable would be saying, it wasn't me and you to the end. It was John.
That makes Burton be like,
it was
what a
John's
crock
idea.
of shit.
Sure.
And we can discuss this a little bit further in the spoiler section. So that's kind of what happened in Drake. Morgan, very different.
Yeah.
Lil shows up and they could not even for a millisecond hide how disappointed they are. They are getting slammed pretty heavily by the rain.
They also have no rice.
Yes. So
another mouth to feed is not exactly what they need.
And Lil, instead of being all like, I want to be a part of you and I get this, she's all like, why did this happen to me? Oh, this is what happened. You guys did this to me. Like, both sides. And the question is, who's more to blame for how terribly any of them pretended that this was going to be okay? Is it the Morgans, and maybe specifically Savage? Or is it Lil? Or is it just one of those trades that works out well perfectly for both teams?
It's kind of like that old saying, it takes two to lie, one to lie and one to listen. That's a Simpsons quote. That's why I said it. Sorry. None of you cracked a smile.
But also, the answer to my question is
Both.
both.
No, it's both.
Yeah, Savage is so bad in this.
He's really bad. He's really bad. As someone who, has held grudges before, that is definitely someone who is completely blinded by anger for like 2 straight days.
He is, yeah, it's so bad in this, and like he's gone on record, I think, speaking with you, Matt, that he just plain ass wasn't listening. Once this Outcast came, he was just so blinded with anger that he and we see it. He has to be told that they can't vote out this misfit, is what he's calling them. He's not even calling the Outcast. One of those misfits shows up, and just the sight of Lil, somebody he seemed to have like some generosity of spirit, not only when he put it out, but earlier in the episode when they're discussing all of the people who couldn't possibly survive, as well as Osten has this scenario. They're still like, oh, Lil, God bless her, but she comes back and just like her very existence disgusts him, and he cannot hide it.
My favorite part is like in the morning when he's talking to her, and like why he's talking to her about this, I don't know, but he's saying how frustrating it is because they fought so hard to like even it out and stuff like that, and now this happens, and like all I can think of, I was like, it's still even. I mean, I guess all I can think of is they probably don't think it's merging at that point. They get Lil and Drake gets Burton, so it's not going to be even for
that's
long.
Not super equal there. I mean, my favorite part is the one that Andy referenced, where he's like, "We're just gonna vote that misfit out right away," and then Rhino is like, "They're immune," and he's like, "What?" What? And just the way Rhino says it, it just always kills me. It's so good. It's so good.
And like, look at what's happening on Morgan. Like, they are very much now like, the us versus them. We're the family now.
Yeah.
When they had to get rid of Osten, it was like we don't even know what their choice would have been had Osten not volunteered. Dara was always the next, but I kind of starting to feel like they would have just voted out Osten anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it, is that especially now once he hears that they can't vote this person out and they don't even know who the person is yet. That means if they lose, and man, they were going to lose. Like, they lost so badly at the Outcast challenge, right?
Oh yeah.
Now they have to vote out one of their 4, and I don't think he's mentally prepared for that at all, which I think also like factors into how poorly he treats Lil, because he can't pretend the way that the Drakes can, that, hey man, we want to get rid of John anyway. Like, even if like whoever you were, we would just get rid of John. We want to do that. There's nobody they want to get rid of.
Yeah, ironically, Morgan being a more closely bonded tribe ends up screwing them over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you also kind of saw it, when actual strategy discussions start happening this episode, and like, whoa, strategy, right? Incredible. But Lil comes up to Savage and is basically like, you can't promise me that you would take me to the end with you. And he can't. He cannot in that moment promise her, because it's absolutely 100% untrue. And like, he can't even make himself utter the lie, because it would be so obviously a lie. It's like, and that, because no, of course not. She would be 5 in their tribe.
Yeah. And so Savage looks the worst in all this, and frankly, like, he is. So like, it's just so against everything that Andrew Savage represents, and he can't hide it. And I love that about him.
It's so great.
So perfect.
It's so good. It's so
but
good.
like, where's everybody else? This is when you should have somebody else you can send in. Tawana. Please,
Tawana and Dara at the very least should have been like, it's 5 of us, and then we're 3, and we can go women to the end or something.
Like Rhino should have been on full-time just Savage distraction duty. Just be like, you gotta keep him just anywhere, just away from her. He does not talk to her unless he's in a group. And frankly, he still shouldn't say anything. He should just make his presence known there. Like, yeah.
And of course, we don't know what they don't show, right? But you really didn't get the impression that Lil had any other ins, right? Like, frankly, I think she's talking to Savage because he was the only one who used to talk to her.
Yep. I mean yeah. So just imagine how bad like the other people were treating her.
Yeah, so like it's easy to pin, and the other reason, of course, why it's pinned on him is he is the one to pay for that, and that is the story of the episode. But it has then become, because many people who visit our site, who exist on the internet, are very anti Andrew Savage, right? And this is the point, the illustration, and they're not wrong. He handles this so poorly, but
Oh yeah.
the thing is, like, to the point where like they try to undo that. This is incredibly unfair twist that happens to him. Like, yes, he should have done better. I think we've also underlined the ways that 100% had so much room for improvement. I don't know if any of it would have mattered, but it should have never been in this position. Yeah, it's unfortunate that he voted somebody out callously back when everybody you voted out never saw again unless you showed up to like a charity event. You had no reason to be kindlier to Lil when they voted her out, and as we saw earlier, I think he was the kindliest to Lil. She was behind the chopping block and Skinny Ryan. But yeah, we don't see anybody else on Morgan do a goddamn thing, to the point where when we get to the merge, it's just the four of them talking. Like they always seem to hang out with each other.
Yeah. And I mean, their only chance when they got to the merge was basically like, hey, do you guys hate John? Because we hate John. Please say you do, please.
Yeah, like I hope they talk to Rupert a bit. Like I hope that actually happened, but we don't see it. Because you have to know those, like there's nothing he can offer Lil at all. Like even if it's like, stay with us for what? To be in part of a tie? I guess she's immune.
Yeah.
So she won't be drawing rocks. But yeah, it's dire. So yeah, like Savage is really bad. But I think when people like criticizing Savage and he's the author of his own vote out, and like I don't think that's true. I think even if he plays everything right, he still goes home.
Yeah, the one thing is, and we weren't shown this, so obviously it's just speculating on what's not there. Would Lil have been as eager to flip to vote out one of the others, or was this a like very much targeted, like, oh yeah, I'm with you 100% if it's Savage?
I think they pick Savage, and I think because of the way Savage treats her, she has no issue with it.
Yeah,
but I don't think they give her like the
I don't think so
to
either.
sign over the death warrant. I think we see them all like who is the highest value target, and it very much fits everything we've seen from Drake, right? This is the way that they approach the game. And contrast that with Morgan. They just want to vote out the guy they don't like, the guy that isn't honorable like they, right? Like they're not doing this strategically. They're just like, oh, we got to get rid of that guy. Whereas, I don't know if Drake would have targeted anybody else but Savage.
It is funny to think if Osten hadn't quit, which we didn't discuss, but like if somehow, say, like Derek gets voted out instead, like, do you think Drake votes out Osten because they think he's the strongest?
I think he's in the discussion. I do.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Funny would that might be like, nah, but I think they like when they're like, who's the biggest target? Instead of just it's so obviously Andrew Savage, I think they'd be like, what about Osten? And
plus, there's a chance that once they're at camp, it like becomes instantly clear.
Yeah, and Austin's so
like,
I think it's a discussion point. What about Osten? Or like, no, we don't need to go after him, because like it's not just that he's the physically strongest when they pack Savage. He's also so clearly the leader, and they're like, if we get rid of him,
right? They even say something like "cut off the head," and which is obviously referring to him as the leader. So,
but yes, I do think for Osten, they at least bring it up, and then they don't discuss it for very long. Like maybe Rupert brings it up because like that's the way he thinks, and also Savage, I think, bonded with him more. But so yeah, everybody likes to blame Savage for this, but the point I was trying to get to is, I think in doing so, people are really underrating just how much Lil sucks in all of this. She is such a victim, and she doesn't let go of it for a single second.
Nope.
She was not wronged that much. She was the last member of Morgan to be voted out. They let her, like, what did they want from us, Lil? And apparently it was just let us know a disputed fact over history, whether that happens or not.
And like, was that really gonna happen? It's like, I hate when people say, like, You didn't fit in as well. You're the oldest person there. You're not, one of the, like, it's not that big of a surprise. I'm not saying it was like the right thing to do or whatever, but it's like, if you have seen the show and if you're like looking around, you shouldn't be that shocked.
Yeah, like it's just, who else was it going to be? I can't even remember who she voted.
Dara. The only other option was Dara, and like, okay, so it wasn't Dara.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Like I understand, like Skinny Ryan is like, that dude told us to vote for us.
Yeah, I think he has more reason, And if he found out, like if it had been Skinny Ryan came back and then he found out Osten quit in the last tribal.
Oh yeah, he would have been like, "I told you so," and then, but then they could have blown smoke up his ass, and it would have been like, you know what, you were entirely right, Ryan. You were totally right. We should have kept you. We were wrong. I don't think they would have, but they could have.
No, they wouldn't have. They don't have that in them. But here's the other thing, Lil. What happened after we voted you out? We never lost again. Like, you can't blame us for this. This is totally like, again,
they clearly weren't wrong.
Yeah. So it's like, Savage should have handled this. Like, there's barely anything he could have done to handle this worse. Yeah. But she sucks so much. You can't stop. Yeah. Like, she is so much worse now than when they voted her out. And it's just like, she can't get over herself. You even see it when she's voted in. When she or maybe not even full, like, she's like, oh, people do like me. Like, she pulls the stupid Sally Field bullshit.
It's like, no one ever said they did.
Let it fucking go, Lil. All right, you're a grown ass woman, and your whining is now, and not again spoilers, but I don't think it gets better for the rest of the season. So
Rupert is more bullied than Lil on this season.
Should we start a new feature since we have one coming to an end? Did Lil suck this week?
I think maybe that's the idea, and
I support it. Yeah, I feel good about it.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, and then one last thing
that
about
was an
Savage,
audible, by the way.
I just wanted to share an observation. Savage seemed checked out from the rainstorm on this episode, didn't he?
Yeah, totally.
Like,
I don't think he checked back in until after the merge feast, and then he was like, "Oh my god, I can think again." And it's like, "Yeah, dude, you were brain dead." And
I mean, they ran out of rice. Like, that last bit of rice for 5 people with not a lot of rice.
Nope.
Yeah. So, like, beyond just like, his, raging sense of morality over the twist and all that, like, even before that, it's just 100-yard stare from him. He's trying to give the pep talks of how, like, OT will give him something when they need it. Or maybe not.
Honestly, that's my favorite line. He's like, but OT, he'll rally when we need him. Pause. Or maybe he won't. And it's just like, he is.
It's just, the guy was having some bad days. Like, in the challenge, he just didn't seem like he could get up the ladder. Like, I couldn't understand what his struggle was. He got there and then doesn't get up.
I thought he had trouble at the beginning jumping under.
I think he was editing, who knows? He seemed to be like he was the first one in his heat to get to the end, and then the last one to get out of the water. It was very weird. Anyway, I just want to say that because it's just like, that dude just was hurting the whole time.
But also, the challenge was so unfair because his flag was the furthest when he had to run down to the beach. So obviously it was stacked against him. I'm joking here.
What running to the beach?
Oh, during the Outcast challenge at the beginning of the Outcast.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
They got to run down and pick up the flags, and his was actually slightly further, but it was like 2 steps.
All right.
2 steps can mean everything.
So to your point,
that was not the difference here.
This is the final edition of our weekly discussion. Did Osten suck this week? And I just want to say real quick that this wasn't like a semi-spoiler when I planned it. We did not go into the season planning on this being a weekly discussion point leading up to when he quit. It was just after a few weeks we realized he sucks all the time. So then I was like, that's when I decided maybe we should just ask it. I didn't know the answer would always be yes. However, this week is the answer to what's the answer? Did Osten suck this week?
I'm gonna go first here. No.
I agree.
God damn it.
Because here's the thing. For the first time, he does something good with his time, and that is quit. He's like, you know what? I'm done. And it's like, thank you, Osten. You are leaving our TV show. You don't have to suck anymore. And he didn't do anything else. That's pretty much all he did this episode. Just get off our show.
Also, not only, you could certainly argue that being the first person to ever quit Survivor sucks, but like now that we've seen other quits, like he waits until the tribal council, he knows, and this is a situation where like this is the tight tribe and like they're close and his heart is not in it and he knows these other people are. And so it's kind of, it's like, I mean, not a large sacrifice, but it's kind of, he's like, falling on the sword. It's like,
There's
what?
some nobility to this.
I don't want this as badly as you do. I'm not I'm not going to make it that much farther. I can tell. So why should I push myself that much farther when I'm unhappy, my body is hurting or whatever, and take this dream away from you?
His temple.
Yes.
Fuck off.
I thought he was very clear-headed and calm at tribal council. I thought he explained himself well and stood up to, not only the, the battering he's taking from Probst, which is so hilarious when Probst is like, well, I'm not picking on you. You're 100% picking on him. You are making this fully into
like,
a thing.
You know what? You can. It's fine. Like he's honestly a great sport about it. For someone who's like quitting, he's like very, straightforward and it's just like, yeah, it kind of reminds me, even though it's obviously, it reminds me a little bit of, sorry, spoiler for a future season, but when B quit because of her knee, because like, she's like, this is part of my job. Like if I damage my ACL, that will like, yeah, sure, I won't win this $1 million, but like that will hurt my long-term ability. So it is not the right thing for my life for me to stay here. And I think that's where he's at. He's like, you know what? Like, yeah, sure, I could like, I think he's like, I'm not gonna win.
Yeah.
Like this is causing, real damage to my temple, man, my body.
I just found it so funny how he kept saying that. He said it so many times.
He did say it a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then like to the effrontery of the show that so many people try this and how dare you quit. He wasn't quite quitting. You're the one who forced him to quit, Probst. He was just allowing his tribe to vote him out instead of somebody else. They went there fully expecting to write his name down. He was going to write a name down. He was ready to do the thing. We've seen in seasons past, we see in this episode where like they're like, hey, does somebody want to volunteer? Like Sandra does that. She does it mostly as a joke.
Right.
But like Probst is the one who forces it. Now he does that because they told him, production tells him before tribal council that that's what's going down. They probably also told him that they've been hearing this from him since like the third day or whatever. So like that's what really sets him off. But yeah, like this is the way. Like this isn't just us all deciding on the contrarian take or a fun way to close out the segment. I don't think he sucks this way. I respect what he does, especially because I don't mind when people quit. I think quitting is an underrated mindset and asset people have. Sometimes you need to recognize where your situation is in life and be like, it's not for me. I tried it and it's not going to go any farther. I don't need to suffer any longer. We've since learned, possibly though, only through him, that he had staph infections.
This could also be apocryphal.
Yeah, completely. Like, this is something that was heavily reported, and then I keep looking it up, and it's basically he has said that in interviews. So, I mean, easily could be true. People get infections in this game all the time. So the flip side of this is people get infections in this game all the time and they don't always quit. So yeah, I'm sure your body was failing you. So was Savage's. But in terms of like how he held up and was very calm in the tribal council. So not only is Jeff attacking him the whole way, like his tribe mates sell him out a lot. Like it doesn't take much probing from Jeff to be like, oh, I would never be a quitter like Osten. It's like, man, fuck you. You don't need to do that to the guy. He's doing this for you.
Yeah.
Would you prefer to
Seriously.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure most of it's just like posturing for TV and stuff. But I think definitely, I mean, some of it is just the fact that he's like a big, strong guy. So it's like unexpected. But I think if he's not the first to quit, hell, even if like Jenna had actually quit at Amazon, or if this is like season 17, season 27, season 37, instead of season 7, I don't think it plays quite the same way.
Yeah.
because now we've seen it before, but it was the first time. This I do remember, when I was 13 watching, because it was a big deal. No one had ever quit before. And as much as now we're like, I mean, he was at tribal council, and that is, to me, that is so different than when people quit, like can't even do that for their tribe and like wait for a tribal, is like, it's just not that bad.
Yeah.
It's, it's not, I mean, I guess Purple Kelly and Anko were at tribal too, but they were only because Jeff made them.
Yeah, and he has every reason to expect that if not merge right after this, not long from this. So it's like one of us has to go. I'd rather it not be any of you because I'm done. Yeah, no, good for you, Austin.
Yeah.
This is the one good thing you did this entire season was finally exit it with your head held high. And so the flip side of this is, Probst is so angered and affronted by this to the point where you get the symbolism. And I think a lot of people, because Jeff for the longest time would take this very angered stance with quitters, and he softened on this. Do you have an issue with it?
With quitting?
With the way that Jeff treats Austin, and that Austin's quit or other quits in the future?
I actually don't really have too much of an issue with how he treats this one, because this is the first one, and you don't want to, and I think at the time you don't want to send a message that it's like you want this to be a common thing and that you're okay with it. I think he softened over time because like there are good reasons to quit that happen at times, and just over time it has not been that there has been a rash of quitters, and it has very rarely, like really negatively affected a season, with the one exception probably of Nicaragua, where 2 people quit right at the end. And it was like, what the hell? Like, you're doing this now? But yeah, I mean, so I don't really blame him too much for this one. He probably carried the, this manner too long, but this time I don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah, I think the issue that, for one, people often don't like anything Jeff does. But the other thing is, like, it does fit so squarely into the Probstian macho bullshit version of the world.
Yes.
But I also do think that there is a reason for the show to actively discourage the idea that, you can just peace out, because it's hard. The show is supposed to be hard. You signed up to struggle. And I think why, this one really angered him. For one, it is complete macho stuff. I don't think he does this if it's a woman or a weaker player. But, Austin is supposed to be, you're supposed to be one of our strength guys, suck it up, pussy, basically, I think is kind of where he's getting at. But it's also a time when a lot of people want to be on this show. It's not like now where they're reaching out and trying to find people. It's like, we probably turned down, a lot of people to get you, and you don't even do this for us. So I can see where that's coming from. But yeah, just like how I understand why he needs to come down hard, phrasing, on people who throw challenges, even though it's often like a strategically sound. Not this season, but at times strategically sound because they don't want people to do it. It hurts the TV show. I can get it from that perspective, but I also do like that lately he's been like, whatever. We cast more people than we have time for anyway.
Yeah, they build it in. And it's kind of on the opposite end of why he talks about big moves, even if it maybe isn't always a strategic thing. Because sorry guys, that's more fun than a pagonging, even if it's not the perfect way to play.
All right. Our next weekly segment is the weekly Updog. As we talked about at the beginning, there's one topic that's kind of dominating a lot of thought and discussion, but unless Matt's gotten an update, we don't quite know how this one's going to finish up.
I've been checking. We do not have an official update.
So since we're not gonna talk about this one because we're reasonably comfortable with how it's going to turn out, we don't know.
Says the Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, I am reasonably confident of how it's going to turn out. It's not my election though. Instead, we decided an election discussion in the sphere of elections is share one. Maybe you only have one. Do you have one? Positive memories of an election past. We'll start with Matt because he was like, maybe I have one.
Yeah, so the night of the 2008 election, that was that's like the one that I remember being like really excited about, really happy about. That's the positive night. I remember I had a really crappy roommate at the time, and he was like, I'm going to go run out and celebrate with people. I'm like, cool, man. I'm just going to stay here drinking, celebrating by myself. So that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah, for me it's also '08. I was a freshman in college, and so it's November, so like first semester, that's like your peak, like really just you're still friends with like everybody, So we were like all in a dorm, like I can kind of remember all in a dorm and like watching it, and had that might have been Oscar. Like I think I had Martinelli's because I'm a dork, but like other people obviously had alcohol. And we were watching, I think, mostly the Daily Show coverage. And once it hit to, because we were 18, and once it hit to Obama, we were like, turn it to Fox, let's watch them cry. Like definitely had that attitude. And then like similarly, I remember watching the inauguration in the lounge of that freshman dorm and being like, this is a moment, man, But unfortunately that election night, then we're like, okay, now let's look at all the California results. And then that got bad. And we were very upset about Prop 8. But hey, now that's better. So at least there's that. I also, I'll just share, so I grew up in a super duper liberal town. And so I went to like a Catholic university. I wasn't like totally sure how that was gonna vibe, but I think they went like 75-25, like it's Jesuits, it's still LA, but
Right.
I was in a friend's building, and there was someone in their hall where on the little whiteboard that you have on your dorm, some girl had written to other girl like about how like, oh man, we're gonna have to move to Canada now because Obama won. And I would be like, that only works when we say it. Like if you are worried about Obama's policies, I have some terrible news for you about Canada.
Well, great news. You will not need to worry about Obamacare in Canada because we would never settle for such stripped down bullshit.
What about you, Andy? You do not live in the U.S. that has, for the past 20 years, disappointed us so often. Do you have any happy election memories?
Yeah, this is gonna be great. If any of the listeners know about any of the things I'm about to discuss, drop it in comments because I believe I don't know.
Looking at you, Hornacek.
My wife, maybe. My wife.
My wife.
2 years of marriage, and my husband hasn't made a my wife comment once. What am I doing wrong, you guys?
Divorce.
I'm worried.
Yeah. So I live in a province where literally my entire life has been run by the same government, the same party. Now, I realize saying that to Americans, I started thinking about that. It's like, that might not be unusual for many states, right? Like some of them have never switched colors, either, federally or maybe governed. Yeah, not for you. I believe, and you have a Republican Congress right now or whatever. Whatever you call it for the states. But in Canada, that is incredibly.
I think she was referring to the famous actor that was her governor.
I think he was talking about you, though.
Well, of course, yes. Your governor, who is a Republican, the famous actor.
Yes.
Then you have a Republican state house, right?
Yes, and state senate, actually.
The actor, there was a recall. Like, it's very hard to both be like, vote no on the recall, but if you do, vote for this guy.
Yeah. But in Canada, it's very unusual to have that level of sustained, control by a single government, if for no other reason that we have multiple parties, more than two. But where I live, it's not unusual. Generally, what happens is there's one party forever. They finally lose, and then they cease to exist. So what happened? And so in the one that had been literally since 1971. Is the Conservative Party here in Alberta. They were called delightfully the Progressive Conservative Party, the very People's Republic of China type vibe to that. Finally, in 2015, they were voted out by the New Democratic Party, which is our lefty party. So there's a liberal party where here in Alberta they're nothing. They were the party like when the province first started, and then barely ever won a seat since then. They're persona non grata. But to the left of that, this is the very socialist party, the NDP, won in 2015, and that was very exciting. Now, and there was factors, basically the conservative group splintered into multiple conservative groups, but it was like exciting to finally, imagine if Texas elected the Greens or something. I can't even say the Democrats, because we're kind of Canada, Texas now.
Imagine anyone electing the Green Party.
Yeah, and we have Green parties too, so that's not even like electing AOC to be their governor, I guess, because that's probably the best comp, because it was our very left-wing party. It was led by a woman, although it's not unusual that we had a female premier. She was actually beating a female premier. The previous premier who had been elected was a woman, but she had resigned. Anyway, so that was probably the most exciting. That it's like, oh my God, Alberta's actually changing. There's like room for us left-wingers. And then, in 2019, they elected an even farther right party because they united. In fact, that's what they're called, the United Conservatives of Alberta, because at least keeping the tradition of when you lose, you cease to exist as a party. That's at least the one Alberta tradition that can carry forward. So there we go. It was exciting for a briefest moment that like we had a very liberal mayor in the city I live in, and then an even more liberal, provincial party, and then Trudeau.
Having excitement for a brief moment. I wonder what that's like.
I guess for you, imagine the opposite, and that would make you happy. All right. So share in the comments. Some if you've been around for more elections than say Emma, so you might have more interesting discussions. You also you can remember 2008 was historic and was exciting. Just because he didn't accomplish as much in the preceding 8 years, it's not. I don't think we should have gone so far that it's like, how in the hell did the country who you're currently dealing with do that back then?
Because we did that.
No, of course that leads to the disappointment. How in the hell did the country that elected Obama also elect Trump? And of course the answer is as a reaction. All right, so that's all we have for this week in the non-spoiler section. You can leave comments on our website at purplerockpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, all of that. Time to talk about spoilers. Spoiler
time, it's spoiler time, it's spoiler time, it's spoiler time.
So let's start at the beginning of the episode, which follows the tribal council in which Rupert Dares got 2 votes. It's a bloom off the Rupert rose when he at this point in the season, when he comes in there yelling like a madman, like, what do you guys
voted for me?
It's a bad look. It really is. And I gotta say, even the first time I watched it, so pro Rupert, just completely in the tank for Rupert. When he does that to somebody I disliked quite a bit, I was still like, that's not cool. It's time to chill a bit. But then I did rationalize it in that, well, I still like Rupert and I hate John, so I'm okay with it. My kid, he was just totally like, no, it's John. He's the worst. Like, totally in the tank. But it wasn't a good look. And I think now everybody who has watched Rupert since, and the way this season goes, this is the moment where you point to is like, see, he was always an asshole.
I also really like the way John handles him here, frankly. John's like, yeah, it was me. I voted for you. And he's like, how dare you? And John's like, I thought you were the vote. I'm sorry.
That's what the tribe wanted, according to what the best of my knowledge.
Right. Like just John's actual calm in the face of this. Frankly, I was actually impressed by it. I was like, good for him. I don't know if I could have been that calm in that, in the face, especially because Rupert's a big guy. And he's coming at you with
not.
No, he is not. I mean, he's coming at you with a lot of that energy, and you're not you're not even insulting him. You're just yeah, he's just being matter of fact, yeah, this is what happened. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, no, very calmly, very rational. He doesn't antagonize him while he's doing that in the way that he definitely antagonizes Sean,
Yes.
later, to the point where I think John, Fair Play has said in interviews, and this I 100% believe, and that he was actually interested in getting people angry to see if they'd swing at him, because if you physically engage somebody in non-sanctioned moments in Survivor, they will kick you out. And he was
in the rules.
Yeah, and he was hoping to do that not only to further his game, but also in the ways that he planned to be an asshole and a wrestling heel as he went onto the show. It very much fits the bill that Fair Play went into this being like, oh man, it'll be amazing if I get somebody kicked out for taking a swing at me. What did you think about Rupert in this moment, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was like is like at this point, and people people point this out as an ugly moment for like Lex too in Africa, but at least in that the vote mattered because of how the tiebreaker worked. Like that's not true at this point. So fucking deal with it, man.
Yeah, and worst is we talked about this last week. Rupert knew where John was voting. He knew what was happening. They had already told him. Sandra had told him that the vote, both Trish and John are voting for you. So the way he was able to like generate this indignant rage for masking itself as I just need to know, you don't have to ask who voted for me. You know who voted for you, Rupert. You knew going in. This is not a mystery. So it's all just grandstanding bullshit, and just as a extreme example of like the narcissism of Rupert Boneham. And watching it back, it's just like that's it. This is the guy that just always has to make things about himself. And what's interesting, like you saw it a bit with like Sean and the Spear, and we talked about it back then. But I think now, in retrospect, this is what the people who don't like Rupert, this is what they think of him as. Like he's that guy who was, how dare you? Who voted for me? But like, it's telling that it took us like 6 episodes to get here.
And, I mean, sorry, finish your thought.
No, you.
I was just gonna say, it's also just like, I would honestly believe that Rupert still thought the tiebreaker was votes. But that then goes to the fact, something that we mentioned earlier, which is that Rupert's just not a great player. Like, he doesn't know he doesn't necessarily know how to play Survivor the game. He knows how to play Survivor the camera. And that, this is another moment of that. He's like, oh, he's playing for the camera. He thinks this is what it wants to see, but he misjudges here. Like it just makes him look like an ass.
And I think like one of the things about Rupert is the longer he's on this show, the many times he comes back, a big flaw and what it seems like is he's believed his own press clippings. Now he's Rupert, most popular Survivor ever, the character that like he was one of the most famous people in America at that time. However, you already see it here. All it took was the shift of power, and obviously the yelling at John is the biggest part of it. But like from the time that they get rid of Burton, and especially like when they get to make the choice between John and Sean, he is very much strutting around like, this is my camp, and these are my decisions. How about you guys both dance for us and explain who should stay and who should go? Like he as soon as he was no longer,
I do believe that was Sandra's idea.
Well, I mean, it's not hard to believe also she put it up for it, but like Rupert very much feels like now he's got power, right? Yep. He's not the guy being picked on by the big kids, and that's what made him sympathetic. A simple shift in dynamics, and now like he's kind of an asshole. Yeah. And I didn't want to admit it then, although that scene always struck me as, okay, well, that sucks. But everybody has moments, right? Whereas now it's just that was always there, and it just took a matter of getting some attention, or the getting things turned around from him, maybe spending the time on Morgan and everybody talking about how great he is. And I doubt this is unique to Survivor. You don't be like a giant man with a big bushy beard and tie-dye because you don't like attention. Like, I feel like this has always been what it's been like to be Rupert. I imagine Laura has always had to deal with, Rupert being, a drama king. Nah, he's not a king. He thinks he's the king of the island. Quickly getting back to the earlier discussion of why I also think it was an incredibly stupid idea for Rupert to be like, yeah, here's why I voted for you, Burton. Burton votes him out. Burton turns around and votes him out. And maybe if at the time he hadn't set up this adversarial, Burton, I'm going to sit you down and tell you what you need to do to get along with everybody here and why I was instrumental in your exit to this game, it doesn't work out. You guys are like, well, Burton takes it well. Yeah, because Burton is smart. He knows he needs to find inroads. But as soon as he does, he helps get rid of Rupert. Maybe he always would have because Rupert is a threat. But Rupert did himself no favors in that situation.
I mean, the thing was, look, I think getting past this vote was the bigger challenge than looking down the line and being like, what's Burton going to do? I think it's the rest of the people around Rupert that made the mistake of getting too comfortable with Burton, frankly.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. Burton votes him out. I don't think it's because of this conversation. I think he votes him out because it's a threat.
Yeah, I think there's no way Burton doesn't vote Rupert out. There's no way any of them don't. It's what Trisha like.
Several of them don't, so there is a way where some of them don't, right?
Oh, the majority of them,
right? Or
don't choose to vote him out at one point.
Because it's also like, look, I mean, one thing that I've actually been noticing about Burton on this rewatch is that like it doesn't come up that often, but every once in a while Burton says something that is like strategically very sound. And he did it in this episode. I think maybe in the Rupert discussion, maybe another time where he was like, he was like, why don't we approach, like Lil, or something like that. And Rupert's like, oh, like, why would she come over here? And he's like, she's looking for some place to fit in, and he's like, people can go over to them. And and just that conversation, I actually forget the exact way the conversation went, but Rupert was imagining like, oh, like people can go over to that tribe. And then Burton was explaining like, but what's in it for them?
Also, two things too. I want to say another smart thing Burton did was back in the Outcasts when they're saying why they deserve to go back in the game. And he says, whoever else comes with me, I will help you. We will work together.
Yes.
You need that. And then as he's doing that and working with Lil, although also what great luck for Burton in his mind that the person gets voted back as someone he will not be seeing as a threat, although we know that doesn't work out too well. But that's gonna be fun. But the moment when Savage is talking to Lil after they've merged, and you just see Rupert in the background just like, no, I was dying. It was so funny. He was just like, if you're just listening, like he just gives this like stare so that Savage can't see, but Lil sees, and it's just like, it's very this is not what he's saying, but the energy is very like, oh, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Except
hey, we didn't quite get into it. How did Mr. Emma take the boot of Savage?
Dude, he hates John so much that he really thought John was going home. And like, I was like, it would have been a tie. Like, best case scenario, nothing in the episode indicated that anyone else was flipping.
Yeah, you told us that he thought John was going to be swept out of the game.
He fully, he's like, I don't think Andrew is going home. And like, even when it was down to the last vote, I was like, thank God that in this moment he was on the couch and I was on like a chair that's a little farther up, because I was just like every time he would say something, I'd just be like, I'd really pick up my phone, tip to you guys, like. It's just like, I know it's his first time. You're just like root for who you like, but it's just like, in what world?
Yeah. But honestly, that shows the
I will say though,
great to hear.
I will say to his credit though, now he's like, well, now there's no reason to get rid of John. Now he'll probably last for a long time. So he's learning. And also, we didn't talk about the vote out of Sean at all. We just didn't discuss that. But in that, yeah, but this is the spoiler section and we didn't talk about it at all. But
next thing on the list.
I'm just bringing it up now. And again, that's part of the episode. We could have talked about it earlier. And you know, I was like, okay, which one do you think it'll be? And like, who should it be? And he was saying, you know, obviously we know this will not quite work out, but he thought that Sean seemed more likely to flip and also had more bonds with Burton and was more likely to be a connection there. So it was probably the smart move to get rid of Sean. And I was like, look at you thinking it through.
Yeah.
Two things. The reason we didn't discuss it earlier is because I wanted to discuss it in relation to what happens next. So that's why it's on the list now. Not that I forgot earlier. Too, but
our
like
poor listeners who are only paying attention to the non-spoiler section.
they don't care.
All two
Nobody
of
gives
them.
a shit that Sean was voted out.
I beat you to it, sucker.
But it's I love to hear that reaction because it shows the simple power that the show has, that, you know, we lose over time. We gain other things, right, as we get a depth of, you know, understanding and knowledge. But yeah, man, it's exciting when you're rooting for somebody and not knowing what's going to happen, and then you know, that loss of innocence of understanding that it's not going to work out and it's not going to be the morality play that you want, that people won't just vote out the people you dislike, and in fact later it becomes a disservice to do so.
I'm
But
so excited for the grandma lie. Like,
Yeah.
what's she gonna do?
Yeah, I'm very excited about it part as well. But it shows why, like, seasons, like later seasons that like fans don't like as much, seasons we don't like as much, can be other people's favorites, because that's when they got on. And, you know, things that are very boring to us or routine are not, if you're, it's all new to you, you know. So like, even like some of the seasons that have sucked recently, the very basic power of Survivor, I think, is just, you know, always there and renewable.
Yeah, you know, in a kind of a similar thing, you know, I've mentioned before that I've been watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race lately, and I didn't start chronologically. You know, I did like what we hear a lot of Survivor people do and kind of hop around and stuff. Brad had really been helping out. And with the first season I watched, both he and XL Pelican said, like, once I finished, said about the winner, like, okay, but when did you know she was going to win? And I was like, oh, like, I mean, I was rooting for her, and like, I definitely thought it was possible, but I, you know, I didn't know how they edit it. Like, I don't know what's valued yet, you know. And apparently to the community, like the fandom at large, that was like a season they liked, but one where it was very clear, you know, who was going to win based on like the edit. But I was like, I don't know yet what's valued in the show, and like what's what that edit vibe is and stuff. And I think Survivor can be very similar. So I totally get when people say like, oh, such and such was my first season, so I have like this soft spot for it. Yeah. Because yeah, you're experiencing it all for the first time.
Yep.
Matt, did you have any other points? It seemed like you were going to jump in a couple times.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. So was it a mistake to keep John over Sean? Knowing how this turns out.
Knowing how this turns out, like, look, obviously John betrays multiple people on their tribe. I think Sean would have too. Now, maybe Sean's not as good of a liar as John is. So in that regard, I'd say probably a mistake. Also, I think that Sean would be worse hiding his relationship with Burton, though John got really bad about that towards the end of it too.
Mm-hmm.
So
it still worked out well for some people in the end.
It should be noted that we shouldn't be taking the Burton part of it into the consideration of the decision. They do not know that Burton is coming back to their tribe.
True.
That's true. Although they all seemed to like assume, which was
it's not surprising. Like, you know, the guy that beasted it in the challenge will come back. They're mostly hoping that he doesn't come back to their tribe.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but it was definitely something they were talking about.
Like, look, we know that John betrays them. We suspect Sean probably would have as well, but frankly, John's a better liar, so that's why you don't keep him.
I'm not.
The one thing is Sean might have. Sorry, the one thing is Sean might have betrayed them earlier. But I think with the Lil of it all, that probably doesn't end up applying. But if, say, it wasn't Lil, or like they didn't bring people back or something, and it's a tie, I think maybe Sean flips in that case. But so, you know, like with the information they had available, like, it's hard to say.
Do we think that they made that decision based on we're more worried about Sean voting flipping than John, or they think you made that decision because Sean has been annoying the hell out of them for a long time? This is what Rupert's wanted to do since before Burton got the idea to throw a challenge to get rid of somebody.
Yeah, I mean, John's been annoying them for a long time
They
too,
do hate them
but
both.
Sean has been annoying Rupert, which is the key.
And
Because-
John annoys them, but was kind of in their alliance, and Sean really wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Sean might have been less likely to flip just because there's less space for a guy like him to flip to. He is a target, if you're thinking just shields, Johnny Fairplay is not a shield. Johnny Fairplay isn't going to go anywhere. The only he ends up being a shield just because of the way that Morgan approaches the game. But again, I can understand why they make the decision to vote out Sean, but I think it might have absolutely been a huge mistake to do so. I think Sean might have been loyal to Rupert in a way that John obviously was never going to be loyal to Rupert. And in fact, we have evidence. At the very last time they were at tribal council, Sean votes with Rupert, is on the side. John does not, as there's a drive into deep left field by Castellanos, and that'll be a home run. And so that makes it a 4-0 ball game.
Are you proud? Do you feel good about
not
that?
really.
Yeah, no. We should probably call this one.
This might be my last week on the microphone, and I just want to.
Okay, that redeemed
All right,
it.
you brought
That
it back. You
redeemed
brought it back.
You brought it back.
Anyway,
I gotta give it up. That was well played, you motherfucker.
But I think Sean probably is just the less savvy player. Like, even if people wanted to recruit him, he's probably annoying them later on by being lazy and stuff. I think Sean is just an more obvious person out there. I think they've already.
Sean being lazy would have bonded him with Morgan.
I know they have this whole ethos about this is unfair to the game. Yet the very first observation from I think it was Krista is they sure don't like to work very much.
I think that's in the preview for next week, but yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Anyway, anything else this week? Any updates? Do we know who the president is yet?
No. It's getting closer. Getting closer.
Is it? Has there been actual change or just
Yes,
in
there
general?
has been. Yeah, I can send you a link of the site. I'm checking.
Well,
that
we're all
has,
doing that in a minute anyway.
Yeah. Well,
but
but
like
do
a
that.
different one, a better
All
one.
right, anything else?
Nope, that's it. And this damn
I
thing.
don't think so.